Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us. I'll give it a few more minutes just for the last folks to drift in, and then I'll go ahead and get us started. If you'd like, please feel free to put your name and your organization in the chat. And yeah, we'll get started soon. All right, it looks like we're holding pretty steady on the number of people, so I can go ahead and get us started. Um, oops. I never know if you all can see where my Teams pops up on my shared screen. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. If you don't already know me, I'm Jessica McKinnon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Homeownership Development Program Analyst here at OHCS. I'm joined today by Talia Concravis, our Assistant Director of Homeownership Services, and other members of our Homeownership Development team and other teams here at OHCS. We host this meeting each quarter as an opportunity for us to share information about what's going on at OHCS or to share additional information or opportunities with you, as well as for us to ask you questions and get needed feedback for our programs. It's also a great place to see new and familiar faces. So before we really get started on our content, we kind of asked this question across some of our other partner calls as well. So is there anyone here today who this is your first time attending one of these quarterly calls for homeownership development specifically? And if so, can you raise your virtual hand? Oh, great. I can only see 4 screens on my minimized Teams, and I see 4 hands. So um, that's really exciting. That's a whole lot of people who've joined. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that this will be a useful, interesting call for you and that we'll see you again in the future. All right. So we do always start off with a little bit of housekeeping. First, this meeting is being recorded and the recording and slides will be posted to our website. Please stay on mute when others are speaking, but you can feel free to enter questions and thoughts into the chat at any time. During the discussion sessions, we do ask that you raise your virtual hand if you'd like to speak, just to ensure that everyone who'd like to speak gets an opportunity to do so. Today's agenda is going to be filled with a lot of questions for you all and opportunities for you to share feedback with us. So first, we do have a few updates on this year's NOFA, where we are and what's next. Then we have some early information to share about our plans for 2026. And we have a handful of questions for you to help us get started. Most of those questions will be polls, assuming that the poll feature actually does work. And then we'll have a couple of broader discussion questions for you related to our requirements and your development process. So I will kick us off with the NOFA updates. If you've been following the NOFA, you'll know that we received far more applications than we have funding to support. We have finished our preliminary and threshold scoring. We have identified all of our eligible applicants and tentatively sorted them into their set-aside categories and their places in line. So we have about 25.8 million in applications that are eligible for one of the two specific set-asides. We've combined them here because while a few applicants were eligible for just one or the other set-aside, more were actually eligible for both. Then we received almost 44 million of eligible applications in the general applicant category. Excuse me, sorry. We are still working through scenarios to determine who will receive our final recommendations, but we don't really see a scenario where there will be any funding available for a second round of LIFT. So we won't be accepting any new LIFT applications. However, any standalone OEHTC applications will still be accepted. We received questions about how we're going to handle tiebreakers, and we are now at that point in the process. We don't have a tiebreaker in either of the set-aside categories. Those have been fortunately very straightforward. However, in the general applicant pool, we are looking at about 6 applications that are in the same place in line. Those applications are asking for about double the funding that is available for that specific space in line. So the NOFA includes a brief description of how ties will be handled. First, we would select the project that provides greater geographic diversity. Then, if that didn't work, we would select the project that provides the most units for our investment. We've been working on better defining what that means per multiple requests. So geographic diversity is going to focus only on this year's applications spread across all of the set-aside categories. We aren't going to focus on geographies like counties, which can be substantially sized, but we are considering applications that are within about 30 miles of each other to be less geographically diverse than applications that are spread further apart. We are also considering the ONA as we make determinations regarding geographic diversity to make sure that we're not substantially under supporting a community with a higher housing need or substantially over supporting a community with a lower housing need. Should there continue to be a tie after this, such as having multiple applications in the same geographic area, we'll then shift to considering investment per unit. For this, we're prioritizing applications that ask for less than 100% of the funding that they're eligible for. If the tied applications both ask for the same percentage, then we'll select the one with the smaller ask per unit. We've reached out to many of our general applicants to ask about phasing or accepting lower dollar amounts in an effort to better support our eligible applicants. So please be assured that we are doing our best to support as many projects as possible in as fair a method as we can. So our next steps, as I said, we're currently working on determining our recommendations for funding. In early May, we'll be bringing our recommendations to our internal approval process. Once we receive that approval, we'll notify all of our applicants whether they will or will not be recommended and start the process for bringing our recommendations for Housing Stability Council. The HSC packet will be posted on May 30th for the general public to see our memo and recommendations. And then our presentation and final approval will happen on June 6th, assuming our recommendations are approved. We should have reservation letters out to those awarded by June 31st. And I'll take a second to pause here and see if there are any questions or anything you want to share about this year's NOFA. Jim, I do see your hand up. Do you have a question, or is that left over from the new partners?
It was left over from the new partners.
Great, thank you. All right, I don't see you. Oh, Pooja.
Hi, Jessica. So my question was that the May 30th date, is that topics because the reason I'm asking is that we are applying for the PSEF application, and it would really help our application to know before before we apply whether we have OHCS funding or not for leverage purposes. And that application, I believe, is due on May 30th, if I'm not mistaken. So is there any way that that could be taken into account for projects applying for PSEF?
So we are going to notify awardees before the May 30th deadline. So if I would say if you are going to be recommended, we could probably give you some kind of formal email or something that might be able to be submitted. The online posting is not controlled by us. It's like the Housing Stability Council process. So we couldn't get that online any earlier for you.
That's great. And do you know when that would be approximately?
Um, I would say if we get our approval from the executive team or if our internal approval, that would be May 6th. And then we could probably write you a more substantial email by the end of that week.
Oh, that'd be great. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Jessica. This is super
Sure.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Was there anything in the chat? I'm sorry, I can't see the chat from my screen right now.
I'll also just say that our Housing Stability Council process has shifted a bit and that we have decision-making items posted on the agenda and people can show up and provide public comments specifically on those decision-making items right beforehand. So if you're a partner and have something to say about your project, you're welcome to sign up to give some public comment. Say if your project is one that's about to be recommended, it's always great to hear a little bit more from partners in their own words about their project.
Great point. Thank you, Talia. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I will go ahead and move us on. The next topic I wanted to talk about is our early 2026 planning, where we have a pretty good handful of questions for you. So first, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Homeownership Development Incubator Program, or HDIP. This is a problem that was substantially created in 2023 with general funds and offered a lot of smaller sub-programs to support homeownership development efforts. Last biennium, only one of the sub-programs of this got funded. That's our LIFT supplemental. This year, we're tracking House Bill 3090, which includes $16.9 million in funding for HDIP and specifically calls out that we must use the funds to support up to 120% AMI and also include funding for pre-development. Should this bill pass and the program be funded, we have some tentative ideas for what we'd like to do with HDIP. So we'd like to continue the Tribal Subsidies Grant, which funds development on tribal lands, which LIFT can't fund, and also other homeownership activities like down payment assistance or home repairs. We'd like to continue the development subsidies program, but also recognize that due to this lower amount of funding, it's likely we'll only have enough funds to support one or two projects of any scale in that program. We also plan on renewing the capacity building program for another round. For big changes, we're planning on dissolving the LIFT supplemental program entirely, since our recent LIFT changes have essentially provided the same benefits that LIFT supplemental used to. And then to a more substantially, or we want to more substantially invest in pre-development. We'd like to start a revolving pre-development loan program. We don't really have anything substantial planned yet, and we would hope that during our outreach, we learn a lot more about how much funding is needed, what that or when that funding is needed. But the general thought is that pre-development funding would support early expenses to get the project shovel ready, and then it would be paid back at closing of lift or your other construction financing, kind of like a lap loan. Our idea here is that this would help us continue to have funding for pre-development over time, even when we're not allocated funding for HDIP. So these are very large ideas and will also be dependent on HB 3090 passing, but we wanted to get a really quick temperature check about how you're feeling about these early tentative plans in general, and then specifically how you're feeling about a revolving pre-development loan. So if you give me just a second, I have some polls to launch. Sorry, this is my first time launching polls. Okay. So first poll is, how do you feel about OHCS's plan for the existing HDIP subprograms? And you should get a little pop-up. All right, so looking like a lot of 4-star ratings, and then some 3, some 2, and some 5-star ratings. All right. The next question for you is specifically, how do you feel about OHCS's plan to create a revolving pre-development loan fund? And that should be popping up now as well. All right, so a pretty spread out mixed opinion. Looks good. Thank you. Thank you all. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I can wait if you're still polling. I was just trying to get a better understanding. So Jessica, for this, would that 17 million be divided amongst travel subsidies, development subsidies, capacity build, and the pre-development loan?
Yes, it would.
Okay. And then do you have any idea of the distribution at this point?
No, I think we'd figure that out based on our outreach. I think I can speak for myself that I don't really know how much pre-development is needed for different projects. So I would need to learn that from you all before we weigh how much. Talia, do you remember roughly what our distribution was in 2023 on like a percentage basis?
Oh, on a percentage basis, I just remember we had 2 point, let me get back to everybody before I say the wrong numbers, but we had 5 million going to tribal grants. Yeah, okay, I'll put a percentage in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Talia. Okay. All right. I think after I'm done with all of the poll questions, there should be time to have more like of a discussion on each of these items. So I think I'll go ahead and move forward. And then if anyone has any strong opinions, we can come back to any of these slides or talk any further. I just want to make sure that we cover the bulk of this. All right. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about our engagement strategy for the next NOFA. We've been working to do more comprehensive engagement and make sure that we're responding as well as we can to all of your thoughts and feedback. And we are really working to make our programs more accessible for everyone. That being said, last year was kind of a lot of long engagement sessions, and I could definitely tell by the end that a lot of folks were getting a little burned out with all of these sessions. So I wanted to share this as our tentative plan that we're hoping will give us a lot of quality engagement without really overburdening anyone this year. We expect to do some thorough outreach if HDIP is funded, and then if HDIP is not, and we only received lift, then the strategy will likely be a little less robust than I'm showing here, since that'll require fewer changes. So we plan on starting with a general survey about our programs and the development processes that you have to kind of serve as a starting point. Then we'll follow that with some focus groups to get more context and detail and start asking some more specific questions about our program design. I think that smaller groups can lead to more engaging conversations and encourage even our quieter partners to share their thoughts. We'd only ask volunteering organizations to attend one focus group. We would, of course, welcome any interested partner to join, but we were brainstorming some ideas for special topics groups, which I've listed here as culturally specific organizations, developers who serve as their own general contractor, tribes, urban developers, rural developers, and small and emerging developers. After we finish our focus groups, we'll put together a proposal for the new NOFA, share those ideas at a larger public meeting, and then allow time for feedback. That may include another survey or office hours or possibly another engagement session. We'll take that feedback to update our proposal and do one more group feedback session, and then we'll move forward. This way, you all will only be asked to join 3 dedicated feedback meetings, though we may ask some smaller questions like these in our quarterly partner calls. So I do have 2 questions for you here on this slide. These aren't polls, these are like a larger discussion question. So first, how would you like to be included in our 2026 engagement? Or more simply, does this plan work for you? And then also, is there anyone that we're leaving out, both in the special topic focus groups, but also just in general, if we're missing anyone through this method? And if anyone has any thoughts, you can raise your hand, or if we don't have a lot of hands up, go ahead and come off mute and say anything. Right. Well, I will take the silence as this is an excellent plan and you like it very much, and we'll move forward with this.
Jessica, I have a quick question if you can hear me.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
This is Joe at Portland Habitat. Is the intent for the focus groups to be virtual or in person or a mix?
I guess I hadn't really thought about that detail yet. I think most of the intent was going to be virtual just because there's folks all over the state, but I think we could have a couple of in-person focus groups.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion either way. I feel like, you know, there could be pros and cons to either approach. So that's all.
Great, thank you, Joe.
I think some potential opportunities for in-person might be at, say, the Housing Oregon Conference or places where people will already be congregating, so it doesn't have to be a different travel for everybody.
Yeah, great idea, Talia.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah. All right. Well, then I will go ahead and move us on to the next slide. All right. Excuse me. So the next topic about 2026 that I wanted to cover is the NOFA timeline. So this biennium, we trialed moving to the rolling NOFA instead of the competitive NOFA. I feel that this method has been a success, even considering that we need to make some adjustments based on this year's applications. We'd like to adjust this even further next biennium, and rather than hosting one long NOFA in 2026 and one short NOFA in 2027, we'd like to instead offer a single 2026-2027 NOFA, which would bring us one step closer to the ORCA process. We believe that merging the two NOFAs into one would help us better align with LIFT and fiscal deadlines, but also I think it would help us be more predictable and relieve some NOFA burnout and fatigue. I don't know about you all, but I feel sometimes like we move from outreach about the NOFA to writing the NOFA to training you all about the NOFA to you all completing the NOFA to scoring the NOFA. And now, even though this NOFA is not done yet, we're already talking about the next NOFA. Moving that process to every other year would allow our team to focus on process and program improvement elsewhere. But also, I hope that it reduces the work and time that you all would have to spend thinking about the NOFA. Running the NOFA is my job, but I also recognize it's not yours, and you shouldn't need to set aside so much time each year to make our program work. That's not to say that we don't value or want your feedback. We definitely do. I just don't want anyone to get tired of giving us feedback. So we do have a couple more poll questions here. The first is, if we expand to a single 2-year NOFA, would you want us to make all of the funds available at once, or would you prefer us to reserve some to release later in the process? And then if we do reserve some funds, when in the process do you feel that we should make them available? And sorry, I'm just getting to this next poll. And it should be popping up now. These interactive polls are fun. I like watching the bars just change over time. So it looks like we've got a pretty big tie between releasing the funding up front and releasing half up front and half later. We'll probably need to do some additional feedback about this one. Right. So then the next question I'll launch now about the timing of the second, if we do half and half. So that should be up on your screen now. Also, oh, great. I was going to say, if anyone has any thoughts or questions, to feel free to raise your hand. So go ahead, Nora.
I voted, but I also just wanted to make a comment that this is a really new and interesting idea, and it's hard to fully think through pipeline and how this may or may not affect our own projects in a very quick fashion to answer your poll. I think that especially the question of should it all be released at once versus some portion and some portion later, I think deserves more conversation about that. I answered your poll questions, my gut kind of response, but you know, we're planning ahead on what we're going to apply for next year and what we're going to apply for in 2027 and making decisions based on like the effort we put in when. And so if it's all going to be released next year, that's just like a different way we need to start planning right now. And so different than what we were planning. So I like this idea of keeping it open. I would like to think about it more and have further discussion. And I'm hoping other people are feeling the same way, but that I just wanted to say that out loud.
Yeah, and that's a great comment, Nora. Probably something I should have expanded on. This is like really early. We've had some ideas, and let's see what our partners are feeling about it. If we do move forward with doing a 2-year NOFA, that'll be a lot of engagement to figure out what that looks like. We're not going to base our decision off of one poll in a meeting with 39 people. We'll need to figure out if we do half and half when, like, what happens if more people apply for the first half? Do we deny them and then basically reopen with the second half? Or yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that we'll have to figure out as we work through this. But this was just kind of a big idea that we wanted to kind of get a temperature check on mainly. Oh, go ahead, Dana.
Hi, I just wanted to know if when you guys did a further conversation on that, if you could maybe elaborate as to what the benefit would be to release the NOFA at 2 different periods of time versus at 2 different periods of time too. Maybe that would be a little bit helpful. Like if we had a little bit better of an explanation as to what the benefit of that is, that might have changed like my opinion on that, but just not really knowing because, you know, usually when we look at HDIP funds, we're using them for construction, and usually like to spend construction dollars down in less than a year can sometimes be a challenge depending on the landscape of what's going on. But it can also be, you know, it can be easy to do depending on if it's a shovel-ready project or not. So that's just something to think about too, maybe when you guys are polling further or getting just further feedback, just having kind of just some pros and cons of what both of those scenarios look like for folks.
Definitely, and great point. Thank you. So I guess, I didn't ask this question. We were just doing a temperature check. So I'm gonna throw up just a really quick poll that doesn't have a question attached to it. It's just this instant poll. It's one of the options will be a check mark and one of them will be an X. And if you are just totally against us moving to a 2-year NOFA, I'd love to just gauge if there's anyone who is totally against it. If you could click the X button, and then if you're okay with it or a little hesitant but willing to learn more, you can click the check mark. I just kind of want to see if there's a lot of folks who are kind of willing or a lot of folks who are just against it. Okay. So far, mostly okay, a little bit against. Well, a third against, but. And I'll leave this poll open if anyone still wants to respond. But I can go ahead and move us forward. All right. Okay, so the last item for our early 2026 plans is this modular housing lift set aside. This is tied to House Bill 3145, which would require OHCS to use $50 million in lift funds to support up to 5 projects using factory-built homes. And this includes both rental and homeownership, and it'll include a lot of additional administrative tasks meant to sort of increase the capacity and knowledge of factory produced housing here at OHCS and in the greater Oregon community. We'll need to hire new staff and a consultant, and we'll need to convene an advisory board that will help determine how those funds are offered and awarded. It's an interesting bill, but it does mean that any homeownership lift funding allocated to that is probably not going to be ready by January when we normally launch our NOFA. So if this bill moves forward, we're looking at a couple of options and just wanted to get your preference again through the poll system. Primarily, we just wanted to see how you felt about pushing back the launch of the new 2-year NOFA to be later than January, or if you would rather us launch all the rest of the funds in January and then amend later with the new set aside. So just one more quick poll question up here. I appreciate you all taking the time to answer these polls. This one should be up now. And again, a lot of these are really just early tentative ideas based on bills that aren't even all the way through the legislature yet. So mainly just getting some temperature checks. Looks like we're a little higher on just launching anyway and making amendments. And then second place is delaying a little bit, but not delaying indefinitely. So looks great. And again, I'll keep this poll open, so feel free to respond at any time. And I guess, so this is the end of the early 2026 changes. We've still got plenty of time for the last bit of this presentation and meeting. So did anyone have any strong feelings or thoughts about any of our 2026 plans that you wanted to talk about or bring up in conversation? I can go back to any slide if you need me to. Okay, well, I will take our poll responses and move forward with those. And yeah, again, appreciate your time.
Can I just pause for a second on the modular slide?
Sure, go ahead. Let me go back.
Is anybody, maybe hands raised, is anybody planning already a modular housing project? Just curious, because, oh, okay. Oh, great. A bunch of people. Yeah, so we're hoping that it will be fluidly incorporated into our lift application process, and then those that do have a funded modular project can participate as part of this cohort. But there's obviously still a lot to learn about this bill and what will be involved. But that's really great to see that there's at least 4 of you that have modular projects out there. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Great call out, Talia. Thanks. All right.
Did you raise your hand to say something, or was that in response to the modular?
I raised my hand to ask a question.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
I just thought of a question I had about plans. So for the HDIP, when do you think you'll be making decisions on that? And I guess I'm curious of like, if the plans to move forward with a pre-development fund happen, when would you see that rolling out? Or is that still too much in the air?
Well, our goal is if we're awarded HDIP funds, the legislative session closes in June, if I'm remembering correctly, then we would start doing our feedback in July, or soliciting your feedback in July. And then I would hope that we would have a solid plan for LIFT and HDIP by September, and then get your final approval on the plan by October. So our plan is, or our hope is, any HDIP funds would be ready to go out with the NOFA in January. Hopefully we're not biting off too much we can chew, or too much than we can chew. But that's our hope, that's our plan. Any other questions or thoughts before we move forward? All right. Okay. So we wanted to have just a couple larger discussion topics for you, just to help us kind of improve some of our programs where we've run into some sticking points. Our first topic is our vertical construction deadline. And if you're not familiar with our NOFA, we require all of the projects that we award to close on their funding within 6 months, to start vertical construction within 12 months, and then to complete all homes within 36 months. We received some pushback and encountered some hiccups with that 12-month vertical construction start deadline. That is also probably our most potentially flexible deadline in our set of deadlines. So we were hoping that while we had you here today, that you all could share some of your experiences with the 12-month deadline. And even if you haven't worked on the NOFA or had a project funded by us before, are there any circumstances that make the 12-month deadline difficult to meet? And for anyone, is there any alternative indicator that you might recommend that we use to ensure that our projects are staying on track? And this is just a larger discussion conversation, so I was hoping to just open up the floor, and anyone with thoughts on any of these questions is welcome to chime in. I know I have talked to a couple people one-on-one about the 12-month deadline, but yeah, go ahead, Nora.
Yeah, I know I'm one of the people you've spoken with one-on-one, but I just thought I would get this out here in the group setting. So for us, it's really hard to meet the 12-month deadline when a subdivision is kind of in play with a project. And if we haven't been able to get through any part of the subdivision process before we submit for a funding application, which generally we don't, it just takes a long time to get through the subdivision process, get through the site development work for the public improvement project before you can start vertical. And that makes the 12-month deadline hard. For a one-phase vertical construction, we can, even if we're past the 12-month deadline and starting vertical, we can absolutely get that done before 36 months. So if there needs to be an interim deadline, I would say 18 months makes it more reasonable. Even 16 months is doable, but the 12 months is just really hard with a subdivision.
Great, thank you, Nora. Is there anyone on the call who just does not a subdivision and maybe does like a few houses or infill development? Any issues running into the 12-month deadline, or does 12 months seem pretty feasible to start your vertical construction? Go ahead, Lucinda.
Yeah, so we typically we typically don't really get our process really going until we know we have the funding, right? And so then getting
Mhm.
all of your architectural everything done and through the permitting process, it can take time as we're our own developer, construction, all of that. So as a small operation, 12 months is sometimes tricky, but 18 would certainly allow us the time we would need.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Dana.
I would have to second what Lucinda said. We have projects that are typically shovel ready, but in a lot of circumstances, they aren't shovel ready. And so, um, yeah, I think an 18-month window would be really helpful. Just looking at it we do a lot of construction projects and just thinking about how long it takes to put the infrastructure in, especially if you're dealing with county permitting or anything like that, then especially like with tribes, if they're having to deal with whether the land is on trust or anything like that, then that's something to take into consideration too, because making sure that Tribal Historic Preservation Office and environmental processes have been done. Those sometimes you're on a waiting list for 4 to 6 months just to get those things done. So that's something just to take into consideration too.
Thank you.
Jessica, Scott from Ben Redmond, I'll chime in too. I think on our side, it's just changed how we look at our pipeline and our timing for lift applications. We're making sure projects are significantly more shovel ready than they were prior to having that 12-month deadline in place. But I would add in, like looking at this year's NOFA, it means we've put a lot more time, energy, money into the project before lift application. So we've already put a lot of investment in when we're waiting on that lift funding because we have to make sure it's so ready to go.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Scott. Is there anyone, this is silly. Is there anyone who likes the 12-month deadline or is just like, oh yeah, 12 months is super easy for me? No one's raising their hand, so I'm just gonna take that as a no. Um, great. Well, thank you all for your thoughts on this. You don't really see anyone chomping at the bit to share more information, so I'll just go ahead and move to our last discussion topic, just so we finish everything on time. So our second discussion topic is regarding the developer fee. Again, for anyone who's not familiar with our NOFA and our process, our LIFT awards allow up to a 10% developer fee on all of your projects. We were hoping to learn a little bit more about how those developer fees work on your end. So we have these two questions for you. First, how and when do you receive your developer fee? And then how does the timing of your developer fee impact your organization? I don't see any hands yet, so I'll just go ahead and ask like a more simple, just factual question. Do most of you get your developer fee from the sales of your homes, or do you pull it from one of your funding sources? Oh, man, there's been a whole conversation in chat this whole time, and I have not even looked at it. I'm sorry. Okay. So it looks like home sales. Is there anybody who draws your draws your developer fee from any of your sources? That's helpful. So waiting for the home sales, then, does anyone run into any problems, or do you just budget in advance with the plan of like getting your operating costs and everything back at the point of sale? I'm just watching the chat. All right. So, oh yeah, go ahead, Nora. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm the only one talking here, but I started typing and it got too long and confusing. I think for us is most of ours are set up where we don't get our developer fee until after all the homes are sold. And that means that we're doing a lot of work for many, many years without getting a developer fee on it. And that's just the structure of the deal. I would say that typically we don't draw on developer fee from under any of our funding sources because I don't think they allow it, right? So I don't think we can draw on lift funds for developer fee. We can't draw on our construction loan for a developer fee. And so it's just kind of the nature of how these projects are set up. It would be nice from an organizational cash flow standpoint to be able to draw some periodically, right? To be able to get developer fee in every year to kind of help sustain the organization. And so if there's we've had, I think one deal maybe that we've been able to pull something in earlier, but it's usually if it's a multi-phase vertical construction where we can kind of figure out how we can pull some in after the first phase of vertical before we start the second phase. But that's the only way that we've been able to pull anything in earlier than the very, very end.
Great, thank you. Jeremy, I saw your hand up, but it's down now.
Yeah, in some cases, the lender requires that the entire construction loan be paid off before you can take on, or before you can accept any developer fee. So it all has to come out of sales at that point, generally speaking.
Okay. So it's a limit of your construction loan too. Okay.
Might be.
Is there anyone on this call who contracts with a third-party developer who's willing to share how you manage how you manage their developer fee that you need to pass through to them? If not, I know we can reach out to some individuals to use that model, but
So working on a different project, and it's through the ORCA process, and it's for affordable rental as opposed to home ownership. But we did are working with a developer there where we put it into the contract that they would not be able to collect any fees until the end, until we had certificate of occupancy and were able to collect that fee as a reimbursement through the state funding source. So we just built it in up front, and thankfully this developer is willing to work with us in that way, but not every developer is going to be that understanding and flexible.
thank you.
And on the other side, I've seen them contracted. So like we could contract with the consultant or other developer separately from the project, and then they would take a payment throughout construction so long as the funding source is allowed for that type of payment to a consultant.
Thanks, Jeremy. Go ahead, Nora.
Yeah, I want to jump in. So Deb Northwest has acted as a development consultant for a smaller organization, and that particular project had an additional like grant that allowed us to pull some developer consultant fee pretty early on. And so Dev Northwest, as the development consultant, was able to pull a small chunk of the developer fee earlier on in the process to help them through. But then the large majority of the developer fee, it comes in at the very end. And because we're a mission driven developer as well and working with a small nonprofit to do a project up in Blue River, you know, because we were very mission driven on it, we're able to kind of extend or allow the most of the developer fee to come in at the end, but we were able to negotiate a little bit at the beginning.
Great, thank you. I did see Pooja asked in chat that it asked if it would be a soft cost, and it technically wouldn't be. So if you were like a pass-through entity hiring a developer, at least in terms of the way Lyft works, it would still be the developer fee. So like you as the pass-through entity couldn't take a 10% profit or a 10% developer fee and then have the developer also take a 10% developer fee. So that 10% max would need to be divided between your entity and your separate developer consultant. And yeah, I guess got a lot of good feedback about when the separate I don't see any other hands or any new information in the chat. So Talia
Hey,
shared.
Jessica.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi, yes, James Lee with Urban Patterns. Regarding the soft cost consultant developer fee, I just was curious if you could talk a little bit more about that. So understand that the overall developer fee can't exceed 10%. However, if the services are like owner's rep or development consultant services throughout the project, is that an acceptable soft cost to be drawn on LIFT funds over that course of time in the same way like an architect would be during like design development, construction administration?
I think I would want to look more specifically at your pro forma to confirm. I don't want to commit to anything right now. So I'm happy to take this conversation offline if you'd like to. I guess I could reach out to you to follow up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. I know. So, oh, sorry, Talia. I was going to say Lyft is really particular about eligible expenses. So I would want to just make sure and double check that it's fine under Lyft.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Talia.
Oh, I know we're almost at time. I just wanted to remind folks that OHCS has a land acquisition program. It's run out of our other affordable rental housing division, but it has a set aside for homeownership. There's still $1.1 million, and it's a first come, first serve application process. And I know there are a few applicants in the pipeline, but nothing has been reserved yet. So just wanted to remind people that that resource exists, and it's often replenishing from loans that are paid off through Lyft. So just if that is something that is of interest to you, please check out that link on the page on our chat.
Great. We are at 3 o'clock, and I'd like to be respectful of your time. So I wanted to thank you all for your thoughtful feedback. Most of this was us learning from you, and I really appreciate that and all of your time and your experience. If you want to reach out, our email address is here, ho.development@hcs.oregon.gov. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a good week, and look forward to speaking with you all again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.